Good morning. Welcome to the morning market briefing. It is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. It feels like another April day from last year, actually, when we were right up against it, thought the world was going to end, and we woke up in the morning and the world had not ended. So that's very, very good news. Obviously, the big news overnight and really last evening was that we averted the Pakistani mediators helped to avert the end of civilization in Iran, as Trump had threatened, and it looks like peace talks will continue and ceasefire will last for a couple of weeks. I have some thoughts on it, but Tom, I want to give you the floor and give you the opportunity to have some thoughts.
I mean, I think that the real indicator here was that both China and Pakistan, who seem to have essentially strong-armed Iran into taking a deal and a ceasefire, seem to believe that this was really going to happen, that Trump was really going to blow these things up. And I'm about to float out the world's most half-baked theory, and I floated out to Ben right before this, and this is not going to be a popular take. But I've been thinking a lot about the idea that Japan, the only country that's ever really been attacked with nuclear weapons, is a highly productive and peaceful nation, doesn't stir it up with anybody, goes to work hard. Everybody loves Japan. They grind. They've created some of the most innovative technologies in the world. But if you think back to Japan in World War II, there were a lot of similarities. They were big on hiding in caves. They created the kamikaze attack, which is essentially the original suicide bomb. The ethos was, we're going to fight to the last man. Men, women, and children will be used as shields, and we will defend Japan to the very last man. And we will take out as many of you as possible because we don't care. And that sounds a lot like the ethos of Iran at this point. So the question is, would it actually have been more beneficial to society in the long term to actually drop a nuclear bomb on Iran? Would that, in fact, have we been thinking about nuclear war in the wrong way the entire time, which is to say, if we actually did it, would society realize that we just need to be productive and peaceful and just go about our business? Not dissimilar to what Jamie Dimon just said yesterday, which is that we've gotten too soft, working hard, being ambitious, and loving your country, particularly this one, is actually a good thing. And I just think that's it's a very contrarian way of thinking about the situation. But I don't think that these two situations are not entirely dissimilar. I think that it's a great way to get shaken out of your ideology by just getting absolutely blown to bits and having to reorganize and say, hey, what about what we were doing didn't work out for us? And so I kind of think that in the long term, this may not actually be the best solution. So then that's a very contrarian, it's a very callous way of looking at the situation, but it's certainly something that is an interesting thought exercise. So I'm going to throw that out there as my half-baked idea of the day, but it's not going to go over well, I assume, with a lot of people, but sometimes trying to argue the opposite of what happened is an interesting way of thinking about how things could turn out in a different way. So there you go.
No, and I appreciate it. I mean, you said it was unpopular. I mean, I disagree, but I mean, I understand what you're talking about in terms of the similarities between the Japanese culture and what has been the Iranian culture. And I think that what the proponents of this deal would argue, or when we'll talk about that, would say is, look, we're trying to change the culture without having to do that. And by doing that means the old supreme leader is gone. The new supreme leader, according to Hegseth this morning, is on a hospital bed and disfigured. So I think that they're basically arguing that we're kind of achieving that means without the nuclear option, so to speak.
Though I will say there are some new technologies that have come out that I do wonder if the plan, if the stated plan was we're going to blow up all this stuff, we're going to blow up bridges, we're going to blow up power stations and transmission facilities. I wonder if that actually was not true, because there's that really interesting article. We also talked about this briefly before the call, that there apparently is a technology called the ghost murmur, which is an AI-based echolocation technology that they use to find the down pilot, codename Dude Bravo 44, which is a sick code name. It is
phenomenal.
Where they were able to pick up his heartbeat against the desert floor from 40 miles away using, I mean, I guess I was a little confused as exactly what the technology involved, but it involves highly refined diamonds and AI in order to, you can basically pick up a heartbeat against, I mean, a human heartbeat versus, I'm assuming there are animals of some kind out there as well, from 40 miles away. And that's the way they were able to track this guy. You think about the anecdotal stories about Venezuela where they just dropped some sort of energy weapon and all the Venezuelan guys dropped to their knees and their noses started bleeding, and we were able to, do whatever we wanted in Venezuela. I kind of wonder if, like, we've got some sort of crazy technology that we're about ready to roll out. Because, like, you could destroy power stations using, like, an electromagnetic pulse. Like, I mean, there was I want to say it was Ocean's 11 where they use that, where they do the EMP thing and it shuts the lights off and they're able to get in the building. Maybe it's Ocean's 13. Those are very old movies that I've not seen in a long time. But, I mean, you wonder what was the plan, and perhaps we'll never know, or maybe we'll know in 2 weeks. But I suspect that there was something else coming, because there's been a lot of surprises, and Trump has been very open about the idea that you don't tell people what you're going to do. And my thought would be, if you did tell people what you were going to do, that was not what you're actually going to do. So
yeah,
a lot of mental gymnastics on my own part, but I think it's very interesting to sit and just consider deeply what the ramifications of all these things could be, even if the nuclear option had been used, which I very much doubt. But I mean, it certainly could have a different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I mean, I think there's also tremendous damage that even like very heavy conventional weaponry munitions could do as well. And I think that that's one of the things that was threatened, according to Mark Halpern and some other people. Shifting to the deal, it sounds like the Strait of Hormuz will be open perhaps as early as tomorrow, and pretty significantly so. The question is, a lot of people have been asking about the fee. Some people have been saying about $2 million per ship. That's been very poorly sourced. It's kind of putting together things that we've already seen. Oman has actually come out with a statement saying that we're not going to charge fees. And the whole idea was that Oman and Iran were going to split the fee. Now, in a statement to Jonathan Karl of ABC this morning, President Trump said that we're thinking of doing it as a joint venture. It's a way of securing it, also securing it from lots of other people. It's a beautiful thing. So basically the U.S. and Iran would take a piece of the pie. In another tweet this morning, Trump has also said, gave a little bit more clarity on what is happening with the deal. They said the U.S. will work very closely with Iran, which has gone through what will be a very productive regime change. There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the U.S. will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all the deeply buried nuclear dust. So this would be really significant. He says many of the 15 points have already been agreed to. Thank you for attention to this matter. And he also says that anyone supplying military weapons to Iran will be immediately tariffed 50% on all goods, no exclusions or exemptions. So this is where we are this morning. And I think we're seeing, and kind of for a good portion of the rest of the call, and then we'll talk a little bit about the exact impact on markets. But I want to talk a little bit and address what's going on in the business media, because the narratives that I'm hearing in the business media are one of two things, or a combination of these two. Number one, the peace talks are very tenuous at best, and we might be right back here in 2 weeks' time with no off-ramp and the Strait of Hormuz shut and oil going back to $180 a barrel. That's one narrative. The other narrative is Trump completely tacoed, and we now have a lot less leverage in the Middle East than we had before because the Iranians know how to use the Strait of Hormuz. What I would say is, I think that neither of those are exactly true. I think that Iran simply can't just turn off and turn on the Strait of Hormuz. I think that over a period of time, too, we'll get some more piping out to the Red Sea. And so some of the offtake that was going through the Persian Gulf will now go through the Red Sea. I think that's a potential. And I think that you're going to see a lot more pressure put on Iran. And don't forget, too, that there's completely different leadership in Iran than there was before. So all of these things, I think, are true. And as far as the 2 weeks go, I don't know if that matters, honestly, Tom. And the reason I don't think it matters is because this is ultimately about Trump. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. And we said, we pulled up the Wolf Blitzer interview of Trump in 2007 when he asked Trump, well, how would you get out of Iran? And Trump said, you just get out. You declare victory and you leave. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He had a big tweet, and maybe we can pull this up, Hicks, the World Peace tweet. He said, it's a big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough. Likewise, so has everyone else. The U.S. will be helping with traffic buildup in the Strait of Hormuz. There'll be lots of positive action. Big money will be made. Iran can start the reconstruction process. We'll be loading up with supplies of all kinds. Just hanging around in order to make sure everything goes well. I feel confident it will. Be the golden age of the Middle East. This is Trump declaring victory and leaving. And whether or not you think that he won or lost, it really doesn't matter for the markets. What matters is that we're moving on. This is now a chapter in history, and the markets are not, I mean, the markets are up a lot this morning. I don't know if they're up enough, frankly, because I think that Trump has had enough and he's done. And honestly, I think he was done 3 or 4 weeks ago, but needed to get to this point. And now he's gotten to this point. So, Tom, any thoughts or pushback on any of that?
No, and I think that if you look around at the prices that are most impacted here, what it does is the speculators in oil have gotten destroyed.
They're out of business.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it a bunch where if you know oil is going higher, you can continue to push it higher. And it's not even market manipulation. Everybody's running that direction. And so as long as everyone keeps running that direction, you're making money. And I think people expected fire and brimstone yesterday, and it's potential that we could still get it. But those people who were very long buying futures on oil have gotten smashed, just absolutely crushed. The people who said that rates were going to spiral out to 6%, they are smashed right now. There's been a heavy betting on, shorting the 10-year, shorting the 2-year. And
we were looking on Twitter last night, and people seemed depressed. They were like, "Oh, it's so." They almost seeed sad.
Yeah, we were looking at
there was a deal.
Other economic prognosticators who we've spoken on panels with before were just boo-hooing into Twitter about how oil's not going to be $200, and you heard it here first. It was never going to be $200. And the 10-year was never, the 30-year was never going to go 6%. It didn't when we had 9% inflation. Why would it now? That's just the most obvious argument I could make about that. And now we're sitting at close to a 480 on the 30-year. We were buying strips on the 20-year at 520 last week. That's a 40 basis point swing in a matter of days on something with a massive duration number. I mean, that's big upside. Thankfully, I asked for it here on the podcast. Trump must have been listening. Can we keep this thing going until after the first of the month because we had $5 million in bonds mature all on the same day? We were able to reinvest those at nice prices. We were able to attack the belly of the curve, which we've been avoiding because the 10-year was overbought when it was at $3.99, and it got all the way to $4.45. And guess what? It's at $4.23 right now. That's a big move, huge move, overnight in the lodestar of the fixed income market. And so the trick to being nimble in these situations is not extrapolating out. If you have a chart and it goes up a little bit, your time series ends at that date, you can't be like, oh, it's going to continue on that trajectory forever. You just can't assume that because it could be a sine wave, but you don't know. And that's why you can't just go, there's going to be no food on the shelves. There's going to be no Christmas presents on the shelves. You can't be like, oil's going to be $200 and we're all going to be in gas lines and we're going to be right back to the Carter administration. We just had the Carter administration 2.0, and that was terrible, and inflation went to 9%, but you also can't be like, oh, it went up a little bit. It can't go higher. And these are the things you have to sit there and be like, what are the probabilistic outcomes? The idea that oil was going to get $200, a lot of things were going to have to go wrong. And there had to be boots on the ground, and there had to be a lot of things that we were being actively told were not going to happen. And so you have to be there and be like, what's reality and what's people just extrapolating the chart out to infinity. And it could all turn around in 2 weeks, but for the time being, it's like we can't assume it's going to happen again.
And I think people anchor to what I feel like the reason that some people are disappointed is because they had a view of what was going to happen that's different than what happened, and they anchored to a list of what would constitute a deal that is not the list that's constituting the deal. And for that reason, they said, well, that's not right. Like it can't end that way. Like there's almost like this intellectual blockage does not compute. It can't end that way because I didn't think it was going to end that way. And I liken it to like this, and we've seen this a lot from Trump. He plays the game of life. So I don't know if anyone even listening has played the game of life, but I've played the game of life.
No, definitely. Our demographic is men between the ages of 40 and 65.
And I tell you what, the most frustrating thing in the world was when I had the most money and I had all the life cards piled up at the end of the game. And then I was about to win, and my dad would retire to Countryside Acres, where it's basically like, oh, I actually wasn't playing to win the game. I just wanted to have this nice retirement. And I would get so frustrated because I'm like, you just changed the rules. I thought I was playing to live in Millionaire Mansion, and now you're just retiring to Countryside Estates, and that was it. And I feel like that's what does not compute for people. They thought they were playing one game, and then Trump just decides to retire to Countryside Acres.
I mean, you have to think. I mean, Trump is a bully, and the thing about bullies is they very rarely get their comeuppance. That's just the rules. They come in, they call you fat, and they walk out. Everyone laughs at you, and they're already in the hallway moving on to the next victim. And you don't get any recourse, but he gets what he wants. And I think that's a pretty good takeaway for what happened.
So let's talk about the markets because we are seeing some big moves. So just want to give you our thoughts on oil, gold, bonds, and stocks. I know you already talked a little bit about bonds. Oil's down 15 to 20% this morning to the mid-90s. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that'll come down further. It will come down as long as we just kind of go down the futures curve. So I think we've got that going for us. And imagine all of this oil that's been held up in the Strait of Hormuz just sitting on tankers for the last month. That's all going to hit the market on the same day. So get ready for that. We might go from backwardation to contango if you're a financial listener to this. But basically spot prices moving a lot more than futures prices. So we got that going for us, which is nice. And we do have a CPI report on Friday, and people are going to complain and whine and moan about it because it'll be high because gasoline prices doubled in the space of 4 weeks. But then it's going to go down. And I think that's what we got to think about, and I think that's what the market will be thinking about too. Bonds, as Tom mentioned, we went from a 50% chance of a rate hike a week ago to now 50% chance of a rate cut by the end of the year. Still not where we were at the beginning of the year, and I think there's more room to run there, especially as Warsh gets in. Think where we will be in May when gasoline prices are down 30%, just retracing half of the gains.
And the housing market's not gotten better because guess what? Rates went through the roof on mortgages.
And Warsh comes in. All of a sudden, we're back to 3 rate cuts. I think that's likely. And I think you're seeing the impact on the gold. People are freaking out like gold makes no sense. I was listening to CNBC this morning on the way in, and people were saying, oh, gold just makes no sense. I'm like, it makes perfect sense here.
We talked about the transitive property.
Yeah.
They're both valued in dollars,
yep.
And therefore they can be valued in each other. So if one goes down, the other goes up.
Right.
So.
And it makes perfect sense why the dollar would be going down because there's more likelihood of a rate cut coming now. So I think that makes perfect sense to me. One of the few things that, it doesn't always make perfect sense to me, but this one does. And then stocks just absolutely ripping. S&P 500 was up 2.7%. I don't know where it is now, Tom, but certainly having a good day on the futures side, led by tech, led by consumer discretionary stocks, financials and industrials also doing well. Obviously, energy getting a big haircut, down about 5% pre-market. And then all of the boring sectors, they're up, but not nearly as much. Utilities, healthcare, consumer staples, real estate, all of that.
I mean, shout out TK yesterday in the afternoon. He said, the move here might be going very long European stocks because they're the most shorted they've been in history.
LVMH, man. Did you see what LVMH is up this morning?
I mean,
7%.
I mean, the Euro stocks 500 or 50 or whatever it is. Who cares? We don't buy those things. Up 5.5, But that's, but they were going to get hurt worse than us, and therefore it would make sense that their stock market would be up. The Nikkei up almost 6, we talked about it a million times. Who's going to get hurt more by the Strait of Hormuz being closed? Europe and China and Japan and the Far East. Not us, because we make our own oil.
And
we pull it from this beautiful, bountiful earth that we call home.
And you know what? The narrative, I guarantee you, and you're going to read this on all the narratives, the narrative is going to be U.S. dollar declines as Trump tacos again. European stocks outperform U.S. stocks. And it completely misses the point. But, I'm looking at super producer Hicks, and he's laughing over there because he knows it's true. And this is just why we have to cut through some of this media mess. And
well, yesterday he was threatening nuclear war, and today he's a failure. So it's like you can't be both, because you could argue that if he had done it, that would have been a failure. You were arguing that yesterday.
The reality is the markets are having a good day, and the economy is in good shape. We were talking about this yesterday. Good numbers coming through, and I think that'll continue. And if oil prices continue on this downward trajectory, inflation is going to continue on a downward trajectory, and that is all good for the economy, and that's good for the markets. And I think 2.5% is just a starting point. So that's my opinion. We'll see what happens, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.